breezy day here. Um, so I wanted to make a video kind of talking a little bit about just some of the subjects I've mentioned recently and talking a little bit about Neville because honestly, I'm getting to the point, this happens quite frequently, that like when I speak about Neville a lot, I just get really sick of it quickly. So if you haven't watched it yet, I did a video with Cecilia. I posted it yesterday in regards to mental dieting, her experiences and my experiences, and just some of our insights, takeaways, observations, things that we don't really understand, hot takes, all that stuff. I'll put a link above to that discussion we had. You know, I always love talking to Cecilia about this stuff, and there were a lot of interesting takeaways. But, you know, I was talking about Neville's mental diets, and Cecilia was talking about Neville's mental diet approach in that video. And the video I did before that was like a Neville Goddard scam video, right? Where I was just discussing, I'll put the link to the scam video above as well. If you're familiar with his channel, it's nothing new really. It's just me talking about how the Neville scene has been, it's just full of false promises and get rich quick type of selling when you see people talking about Neville most of the time, predominantly. Excuse me. And I don't mean to be overly critical about it at all. Because some of these teachers selling you stuff, Neville teachers, Neville coaches, quote unquote, manifestation coaches, quote unquote, they certainly can be inspiring. And even if they are like trying to sell you something and kind of using pushy tactics to get their point across, if they inspire you or if they shed light on even just one or two of the things Neville is saying, they can be very worthwhile to have as a coach or to do a program with. Like seriously, I mean, that's what people don't get about coaching and getting help in general, is that usually the people who pay for help are the people who get the best results. That's why you see entrepreneurs and, you know, business people always paying for consulting and stuff like that, you know. There's this great video. I'll try to link to it. I think I might be able to link to it. If not, I don't know, you'll have to find it yourself if not. But Alex Hormozi, who's some guy on YouTube and a very successful entrepreneur, smart guy, honest guy, from my opinion, from what I can see, gives this great example. Some of you have probably heard it, about wine tasting. You know, they did this test, and, you know, they brought people in, and it was like, you know, here's the cheap bottle of wine, the medium tier bottle of wine, and the expensive bottle of wine. And unsurprisingly, the results are, you know, they test all these people. People like the expensive bottle of wine the most, you know, and then the medium tier bottle of wine. And then the, you know, the cheap wine they like the least, right? Unsurprising results. This is what the surprise was. It was the same wine. It's just the bottles, they said, you know, this is expensive, this is medium tier, this is cheap, but it was the same wine. People got different results based on their expectation or assumption of what the wine was. That ties directly into everything we're talking about. And it also ties into the value of coaching and getting help. Because just the idea, the assumption that you're getting help in and of itself helps you. So even if some of these quote unquote Neville coaches or manifestation coaches aren't even that great of coaches, and I'm not telling you to go to somebody that like you don't like, don't get me wrong. You got to go to someone you at least resonate with a little bit. But even if they're only helping you just a little bit, you know, investing in yourself, right? And believing it's going to help you, that is enough to move the needle and probably make it a worthwhile investment for a lot of people. But then there's also just getting taken for a ride by these people that don't know what the heck they're talking about. And unfortunately, that's a lot of the people talking about Neville today, which is what that recent video was about. And it just kind of, it linked up with a few things that I've just been speaking to people about recently. Maggie and I had a conversation last week. We were texting back and forth. And I was saying, like, to me, like this whole Neville scene, and I only talk about it because I don't see anybody else really discussing it consistently. this whole Neville scene we see on social media these days, which unfortunately, if you're new to Neville, you're likely going to go on social media to try to find out more about him. And in my opinion, you're going to be misled if you do that. You're better off not to do that and just to stick to the books or to stick to the scant amount of criticism and analysis by people like Israel Regardie and Mitch Horowitz and myself. Like, stick to that stuff and you'll be better off than probably hearing all these crazy, stupid opinions on YouTube. But anyway, I was texting with Maggie and I was saying, like, for me, Neville these days, the way it's presented, it's like people who are very unserious about this stuff pretending to be serious. Like, they have these big opinions and they're not serious about changing their lives a lot of the time, from everything I've seen. Some people are, for effing sure. But getting a technique to work quickly, these dumb, manifest something in 3 days, this will happen overnight, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And even these coaches who are a little bit better than that, they still are just, they prey on these tactics, right? That whole thing is like not being fucking serious. And you want to be serious about this stuff, in my opinion, if you want to get long-term results. Long-term results mean that your life improves and you feel better about yourself. That's my opinion. And I have a lot of conviction about that. And I love helping people do that. See, I'm not a Neville coach. I'm a real coach. I'm a life coach. I'm a mental health counselor, spiritual counselor, whatever you want to call that. But that is not something that happens in 3 days. That's something that takes inner work. So you have all these people like looking very seriously at Neville and saying, oh, this is how it is. And they're not fucking serious about changing their lives in a significant way long term, in my opinion. And it's, again, this is all just my opinion. It's wild. And that's why I talk about Neville so much on this channel, or have been. But I'm going to, in all likelihood, curtail that significantly again, because I'm sick of it. Either you see it or you don't a lot of the time, And it should be obvious, but since there's this massive groupthink about Neville's teachings currently, it's not as obvious as it should be. So I try to point it out from time to time. And I've been pointing it out a lot recently. Before I stop talking about Neville so much, though, I'm going to be having a conversation in the next day or two with Melissa Bassey, who is that psychologist that I had on a couple months ago, who uses like attachment theory therapy with clients and then tries to introduce or often introduces Neville's concepts and ideas with them. So she reached out to me and I said, oh yeah, if you want to have a follow-up chat, we could do that. So look out for that. We'll be talking about Neville a little bit in that context. But when I say people aren't serious about this stuff, I mean it. And the other context here, of course, is, I'm somebody, I did a whole video series called Stop Being Serious. I love not being serious. I think not being serious is one of the best tools you can have, right? But when it comes to like changing your life using these spiritual principles, using these manifesting principles, you have to be invested in it. It doesn't mean you have to be monetarily invested in it, but you have to be emotionally invested in it. And, if you're emotionally invested in it, you're inevitably monetarily invested in it, because time is money in that way. But you have to be emotionally serious about looking at yourself, looking at yourself honestly. And that's not a trick. Looking at yourself honestly, seeing what arises, feeling what arises. You can't trick yourself over that. I was speaking actually to another therapist who's a client of mine, who's really gets this stuff on a deep level yesterday. And she was saying that it's actually is in some ways easy to implement this stuff in a therapeutic setting if you use the right language, right? And we were talking about Coué. And we got into talking about something that I think is important that I haven't really spoken about a lot, and I want to speak about more. And that is even Coué, who in my opinion is the best when it comes to teaching these manifesting ideas, right? And he did not use spiritual language. He just used common sense psychological language to the best of his ability. And he had better results than any of these other manifesting teachers I know of. He said, like, a lot of people would come and be healed through his approach. But even his long-term success, in other words, people following through and doing this stuff for years and changing their lives because of it, even he, I don't think, had that great long-term success in terms of patients, clients, changing their lives. And one reason I say that is because Coué helped treat so many people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people each year. Charles Baudouin made the estimate that at his peak, Coué was treating like 40,000 people a year, which seems crazy. I don't know if the number was that high, but the point is that Coué was successfully treating thousands and thousands of people each year. And, he had basically convinced the French medical establishment, at least part of it, that this stuff was legitimate and that this should be part of the healing therapeutic process in hospitals. He had set up like a clinic for children and healing, helping children heal themselves. And he had people working with him who were doing that. There was a Coué League of America. There was, I think, a Coué League in England. Coué had basically created an infrastructure and a movement, a very humble, non-spiritual, esoteric-sounding movement to help heal people, to help people learn to heal themselves. And even he, with all his success, the most successful manifesting teacher that I have seen the last 100 years in terms of the success he got with people, most of those people didn't probably have long-term success with his stuff. And the reason we know that is because no one knows who the hell Emile Coué is today, pretty much. He disappeared. He didn't totally disappear, obviously, but the power of his teachings has been lost. People clearly didn't implement it long-term in the way that he said, because he said this will make you be able to take care of your body and your health and help others take care of their body and their health for the rest of their lives. And if that really was the case, then more people would be talking about Coué today. More people would have been talking about Coué in the 1940s and 50s than they were, frankly. Coué died in 1926. But it seems like, by the time the 30s rolled around and then ended, it was like people still remember Coué, but it wasn't like people were teaching his material. This stuff's nuanced. You have to be serious about it if you want it to change your life long term. How it's going to change your life is not going to be like in a textbook. But you have to apply it with not just your mind, not just think about it, but with your heart. So, that's very undervalued when it comes to all this stuff. And when we hear people talking about Neville and applying this stuff in such a grandiose way and changing your reality, I think about like what Coué did and how much success he had and how great a teacher he was, and then how seemingly little long-term of an effect he had on people, even with all that wonderful advice he gave, And that goes for, I think, almost all these manifesting teachers, spiritual teachers in general. So this might seem like a rambling video. It's not. This is much more to my heart than me just bitching about the Neville scene. But yeah, I hope you gained something from it. And these are all things that's worth considering, and then applying in whatever way works for you. And if you think I can help clarify things for you, just let me know. You know how to contact me, radicalcounselor.com, or my email, info@radicalcounselor.com. Look for that. I might make a video beforehand, but look for that Melissa Basie discussion later this week. It should be an interesting one. And until then, be serious about this stuff, or stop being serious altogether. They just might be the same.